If your child is struggling with reading comprehension, has been described as lazy or defiant, if they're easily distracted, the next few minutes of this video is going to help you understand why this is happening and what you can do about it. Because remember, there are no bad kids. Behaviors are just windows into a child's brain and how that brain is functioning. So there's going to be a ton of content in this video, so I want you to make sure that you hang until the end, because we're going to explore one of the most crucial right now strategies to apply to this developmental perspective so you can actually get your child to form the pathways that they need to be able to read and comprehend and more. In this video series we've been recording, we've been exploring the 8 hierarchies of brain development. And today, specifically, we're going to be exploring the abstract hierarchy, which is how our brain can make sense and meaning and create imagery, which is really what essentially reading and writing is. So if you think about using a house as an example, if you think about how our brain begins to understand the concept of an object, again, in this case, we're going to be using a house, we start by seeing that object, okay, or seeing the house in front of us, seeing our house, and being able to recognize when we see that that is a house, that is my house. Over time, we don't need to see our house specifically. We develop the ability to understand the concept of a picture, or an illustration, or a drawing, or a sketch. We understand the concept of house when we see an image of that. We don't need to see our actual house to recognize that this is in fact a house. As our brain continues to develop down this developmental trajectory, we can start to understand symbols. Okay, I can see specific symbols to recognize that this is a house. Now, what are those symbols? Well, for example, it is the letters that spell house. Each of these symbols organized together represents that initial object. And this is a really crucial part of brain development. So as the brain develops and blossoms through this trajectory of object to picture to symbols, as we begin to continue through this trajectory, it's not just that we can do each of these pieces individually, but the order is what's important. So why is it important for us? What if we have a child who is really smart and has not yet moved from understanding the difference between an object and a picture? Meaning they can't understand that there's a sketched out picture of a house that represents a house. Should we start to conclude very complex symbols to get them to start to read better? Probably not. They're probably not ready for that, and it's going to overload their nervous system. See, for a child who is stuck in this part of the developmental trajectory, who's struggling with reading, comprehension, and writing, now this is only part of the picture. Because it's not just that they're struggling with reading. What they're struggling with is to make sense of and create images with the visual part of their brain development, which is necessary for being able to understand things like not just words on a paper, but social cues, understand their body and space, and more. So a child who struggles with this hierarchy will often show up as a child who is considered clumsy or isn't aware of outside their body. They may, of course, have reading challenges or be diagnosed with dyslexia. They can have executive function challenges. They might be called lazy or defiant. They're going to often be easily distracted at school, especially when they're working alone at their desk. And they're going to often have trouble recognizing others' feelings. Because it's not just that they can't read. It's that they're struggling with creating sense of the imagery that their eyes are seeing. So first off, for a child who is stuck in this hierarchy, we need to first assess their nervous system to see if their body is stuck in fight or flight or rest and digest. If you're watching this video, there's a very high chance that you are already under the care of a neurologically based chiropractor, or of course, I hope that you are, who is assessing you or your child's nervous system and regularly checking and adjusting them to make sure that there's no imbalance of information from their body that is reaching their brain, so they can get off of being stuck on the gas and get into rest and digest, get into their body's brake pedal, and get into the growth and development part of their autonomic nervous system. Once we have that under control, we are going to begin to assess the developmental tools that our child is using to be able to process, engage, and learn in their world. Now, we know that these also happen in a clear and specific order, from, as babies, primitive reflexes, to there, our gross and fine motor development. From there, our auditory and verbal processing, and what we're discussing a lot of today is this highest piece of the puzzle, which is the visual and cognitive part of brain development. Now, even though we're talking about a child who may be stuck in this part, it's important to remember that each of these are stepping stones that allow us to be able to use that part of brain development. If we have a child who's stuck down here, we need to address first, again, the subluxation or imbalance, but then where are they stuck in this hierarchy before we get right to start to bringing in visual pathways. We're just going to, again, just begin to create compensations for our children and not actually allow them to be able to make these new pathways of the brain so they can assess things appropriately. And if you're working with us, that's the exact reason that we have a game plan put in place to be able to work with each of these tools, not only each of these tools, but work with them in the right order. So as we start to do these two things, number one, correcting the imbalance, and number two, starting to work with these developmental tools, you can start to look for some common wins and help other providers or educators or other individuals look for these too. We'll start to see our child be able to engage in academics more without deflections. So we may have a child who engages in academics really well, but it can be really stressful for them. Maybe we're seeing them always fidget in their seat or have always some kind of distraction or thing they go to, some neurological overflow or way that they are deflecting because they're not ready to be able to process all of this. So if they can improve in academics without those deflections, that's an even bigger win than just improving them whatsoever. We're going to also see a decreased avoidance of academic for those exact reasons. Improved retention because we're actually using that part of the brain instead of just, as we go through different exercises in the rest of this video, really compensating, right? And improved awareness of more complex and abstract concepts in socialization, basically ourself versus others, because we're using that visual cognitive part of the brain, which is crucial for socialization. So if your child is stuck in this trajectory here, don't ignore number one and don't ignore number two and get right to the strategies for the visual brain-based pieces. Otherwise, we're not really getting to the root cause. And working with a doctor like us, if you don't have somebody, reach out with some of the information that's in the description below, and we'll help you find somebody near you. We want to be able to actually get to the root cause of these challenges, which is exactly what we're discussing. So now that we've assessed number one and number two, let's go ahead and talk about some right now strategies that you can start to use at home to be able to help your child be able to fully grasp this developmental trajectory. Now, some of the right now strategies that I love for this hierarchy are things like Simon Says type games, body mimic games where you do a movement and then they do that as well. Because what's happening is they're watching you visually, processing and remembering that, storing that information, and then having body output to go with that as well. Use object and then symbol search games. Johnny, this is a house. Can you find me a house, another house in the neighborhood? Johnny, can you find me another train, one of those toys? Here's a picture. Can you go find me something that looks like this picture? And then just using the word itself. Can you find me X? Or if they read the word, see that you write out the word house and you say, okay, go point to what this word is representing, and they go find that house, right? So that's an object symbol. My favorite game that you can play is called the object picture symbol spelling game, which is perfect for this hierarchy. So we're going to take this in order, okay? Again, let's go ahead and look here, which the order that we have is object, picture, and symbol. Object, picture, and symbol. So the first thing that we're going to do is work with the object piece. We're going to take a couple things and we're going to lay them out on the table. So what I have here is I have a bag of chips, I have one of my children's trains, and let's say I have a pen. We're going to lay them out on the table, and then we're going to cover them. I'm going to say, Johnny, do you remember what was in this position? Oh, it was the pen. Do you remember what was in the middle? Oh, it was the train. Do you remember what was on the left here, over here? Oh, it's the bag of chips. That's the most easy way that we're going to start to play that game, okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to start to use things like pictures. So let's go ahead and we'll draw. Okay, Johnny, let's look at the page here. Let's draw. You guys are probably much better at drawing than I am. If you can see, this is not Maya. There's a nice window here. We've got that. Let's see. My kiddo likes when I draw horrible trains. Train. Da, 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 da. And then here's a smokestack. In our house, that's what a train looks like. And then let's go ahead and say we have a smiley face. Okay. Listen, if your kid can understand these symbols, then they probably don't need this hierarchy. They're probably doing well. All right, so we cover this and we say, okay, what's over here on this side? Okay, oh, it was the house. Great. What's in the middle? It was the train. Okay, great. What's there? Okay, now it's a smiley face. Now, I know that was a silly example because you're probably better at drawing from there. But then what we're going to be going into, we just did the picture. Let's start to move into symbols. So we can start with easy symbols, like we draw an A, a D, and a G. They recognize what those that is. They say it. We cover it. It's like what was on the left, what was in the right, what was in the middle. Great, got that. And then now you got to see where this starts to work. We start to work with more complexity, which we want to build to is something like a 3-letter word. So let's say we have cat. Let's say we have elf if it's around Christmas time. And let's say we have, I don't know, a 3-letter word. Dog. Okay. Johnny, what was on the left side? Okay. Cat. Johnny, it's still covered. Spell cat for me. C-A-T. Can you spell it back to front? Now they're thinking in their head about what the word cat looks like. T-A-C. Can you start with the middle and give me the other letters? A-T-C. See, they're not just sounding it out. What they're doing is understanding the concept of symbols and creating imagery in their brain. And that is how we start to introduce the visual load of reading from a brain-based perspective. See, even if we can look at this word and spell out cat and just sound it out, it's important that we can do this efficiently. How we typically teach this is we have a sound that is associated with letters, and we sound it out. A-t, cat. Now, while that might work really well in 90% of children, if we're seeing a kiddo who's stuck in this developmental trajectory, his nervous system isn't processing things appropriately, they just start to kind of compensate, where they are just figuring out how to just get through the path versus get through the task versus actually creating those pathways of brain development. If we do this and we just have them sound out and we don't work with the developmental pieces, we don't work with the fight or flight response, we don't allow their brain to better be able to perceive information from the environment, we don't address their primitive reflexes, their gross and fine motor development, their auditory verbal processing, and then finally their visual and cognitive processing. If we don't work in an object, picture, symbol order, we start to get adults who spell words like because, B-E-K-U-Z, because they're just sounding it out. See, when we go through the object picture symbol game, when we have a child that can do this, can spell a word, can spell it backwards, can go inside out, what they're doing is they're creating the imagery in their brain. The same way if I were to ask you to spell elephant, as you're spelling it, you're probably thinking of the letters, and our child needs to be able to do that. They're not just stumbling through this. They're actually understanding and developing their brain to be able to accommodate. After the abstract hierarchy, the next hierarchy we get to goes even deeper on this visualization part of the brain and explores how our child's visual system works to process our central and peripheral vision. So click in the corner to learn more about this brain development piece of the visual processing, because we know that there are no bad kids. Behavior is just a window into how a brain is functioning. I'll see you there.